You are listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson, exploring biblical prophecy for yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Here we are again. This is Keith Johnson along with Nehemia Gordon, face to face, doing whatever it takes from the land of Israel, the place of the prophets, the spot where the prophets walked, talked, and spoke and shared the good news of the Word of God. And we are excited to be able to do this session. We're actually in the book of Hosea, Nehemia. We have been in Israel for the last few days, and I'll just tell you something. I've got a big announcement today as a result of being here. I fought you, Nehemia.
What's your announcement?
I have fought you about being here, and it's not the ministry minute yet, so I'm going to take a second. But I want to say something. The reason I fought you is because I was like, well, look, how's this going to work? Where are we going to stay? And you actually found us a spot in the side of a mountain in the city of Jerusalem, where it's down in the basement, 2 levels down in the basement. And the only part that's been difficult is you left me here by myself. Okay? And actually that's been a blessing, because as a result, I've been thinking a lot about not only what we have been doing, what we are doing, and what we're going to do. And so if you hang on, folks, during the Ministry Minute, I want to share something that I came to really just a few weeks before coming here, and it's been confirmed. I'm kind of like Jeremiah. You kind of get a sense of something, and then you see things happen, and you say, I now know it's of God. Mm-hmm. There's no aha.
Alas,
no,
Lord.
Hosea. And Nehemia, we can't start Hosea. We're not going to start the section until we give a little background on Hosea. I think it's one of the most compelling pictures for a prophet that exists in the Bible. But what's the Torah portion?
Yeah, the Torah portion here is, we're actually done with Leviticus. Can you believe it? Yeah! This is the first portion in Numbers, Bamidbar.
Wow.
And it's Numbers chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 4, verse 20.
Now, why did you say Bamidbar?
Because that's the Hebrew name.
Isn't it? But why do you, but so what does that mean, Bamidbar?
In the desert.
In the desert. Yeah. But isn't it funny we call it Numbers?
Yeah.
In English. So what's the connection? Why do you think it's Numbers versus in the desert?
Well, because the theme, or one of the themes throughout the book of Bamidbar is that there's counting. Israel is counted, so they called it Numbers. In Hebrew, they just choose one of the first words of the book. Mm-hmm. And I think the first word of the book is "and he said," if I'm not mistaken. And so you can't have the book called "and he said" because lots of things open "and he said," or it's actually "and he spoke." Vayidabel Yehovah el Moshe. And Yehovah spoke to Moshe b'midbar Sinai in the desert of Sinai. So basically, it's the first word that is kind of not unique, but is And Yehovah spoke to Moses. That's many, many verses.
Awesome.
But in the desert, b'midbar is the opening word.
And it's funny because how does it open in Hosea? And folks, before we get started, there might be a little confusion because in the Hebrew Bible, we're starting in Hosea chapter 2, verse 1. In the English Bible, we're starting in Hosea chapter 1, verse 10. Both of them actually end up with a word.
It's the same verse.
It's just the same verse.
It's just counted differently.
It's just counted differently. But it says, yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea. So when I see that, I think about numbers.
Right. Well, and definitely the theme of this portion of Numbers is one of the themes is that Israel's being counted. Mm-hmm. And that's presumably this association of, back then in the desert you counted them. Mm-hmm. In the future, the number won't be countable.
Isn't that something? Wow.
Yeah.
So yet the number of the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And in the place where it is said to them, and here's what's interesting, a little section here, in the NASB, it says, you are not my people. It will be said to them, you are the sons of the living God.
We've got to finish out the background, and maybe we've talked about this, I don't know. But Hosea is a prophet of the northern kingdom. We did talk about that.
Yep.
It's during the days of Jeroboam II. And he does something really controversial and unusual, but God tells him to do it, so he does it. He marries a prostitute, and her name is Gomer.
Yep.
Which, I think of Gomer Pyle. And to be honest with you, even in Hebrew, that's an unusual name for a woman, but maybe not in the northern kingdom. So her name is Gomer, and they have a son named Lo Ami, which means not my people. And they have a daughter named Lo Ruchama, which means there is not mercy upon her. Mm-hmm. And that's what in that context he says. That was even just the previous verse. In that context, he says, in place of it being said Lo Ami about the people of Israel, they'll be said about them. They are the sons of the living God.
Mm-hmm. Instead of again in Hebrew, they're saying Lo Ami, not my people.
Yeah.
It will be said to them, you are the sons of the living God.
B'nai El Chai. Mm-hmm. Now, when I hear sons of the living God, the first thing that comes to mind for me is Deuteronomy 14, verse 1.
Yep.
And there it says, "Ye are children of the Lord your God." That's in the King James. In the Hebrew, it's "Banim atem laYehovah Elohechem." You are sons of Yehovah your God. So that's actually comes from Deuteronomy, that concept, or it's in Deuteronomy as well. And here he's saying, look, you were sent out into exile. You were banished from being my people, but I'm going to take you back once again.
Wow. It's something, because when you're reading this based on the fact that we know about the son and the daughter and what their names are. And again, if you just started at the beginning at 1 verse 10 or 2 verse 1, you wouldn't know that. You see that, but then in the next verse, and I'm not going to try to skip to the verse, but I want to say the next verse actually addresses that again.
Let's do it. Let's talk about the next verse.
And the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and that's this
kibbutz. They'll be kibbutz together.
They'll be kibbutz together, and they will appoint for themselves. Now, here's what it says here: they will appoint for themselves one leader in English. I think it's one head.
One head.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one head, and they will go up from the land. For great will be the day of Jezreel.
Jezreel.
Wow.
And Jezreel, of course, is the valley in which, in northern Israel, the most important valley in northern Israel. And it also is the name of a city, which was at one time the capital of the northern kingdom. And so when we hear Jezreel here, we really should think of, northern kingdom, because that's the capital. And it's like what you might say in English, speaking about Russia, and you'll say, the news from Moscow is... or Washington has decided, and by Washington you mean the United States. So here Jezreel is the capital of the kingdom of Israel.
Wow. By the way, isn't it interesting? This is just an Israel question again. So in terms of how things work, so the Knesset is right around the corner.
Yeah.
Like we see the Knesset that is there.
Yeah.
But how is Tel Aviv representative in the land of Israel as a city? In other words, when you think of Israel, I think of Jerusalem being, and they talk about the old city, but then Tel Aviv sort of has this other feeling. Like in a lot of states, you'll have one city that's where the capital is, and then another city that's where the action is. In Israel, how does it work? In other words, what's the capital?
The capital of Israel is Jerusalem.
But in Tel Aviv, so much is there. What happens?
Tel Aviv is not just an important city, like culturally and economically. Arguably, Israel is moving in the direction of one day possibly being a city-state. We've both been in Hong Kong, where you have this one city that's almost an entire country, and then you go to Singapore, and it's literally one city that's an entire country. And Israel has this megacity, which is Tel Aviv, where if you take the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, certainly that's the largest concentration of Israelis anywhere. And I don't know the exact statistic, but if it's not currently, it will be soon, the majority of the population living in the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. And I don't know I think the analogy might be, if we look at California, you got the capital, which is Sacramento. And then you have
Los Angeles.
You have Los Angeles, which is a mega city. And maybe the better analogy there is San Francisco, which is like the cultural center of California. I think. I'm not Californian, but that's my understanding. And then you have Los Angeles, which is the population capital, and it's a mega city.
Yeah, it's interesting though, the culture difference between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv.
Oh, it's big.
It's huge. I can't believe how big it is. Anyway, I actually enjoy Jerusalem a whole lot better than Tel Aviv. that's just me.
Me too.
I really do.
I'm a Jerusalemite through and through. I actually have a card that says I'm a card-carrying Jerusalemite.
Really?
Yeah, it expired though. I got to renew it.
Okay. By the way, you have a bus card, Nehemia.
I do have a bus card.
And this bus card, you just put money on it, and you can get on the bus and just put it in and go.
Right, and it's got my picture. And actually, it's a really cool thing. If you lose it, then you can call them up and say, here's my identification number, and they'll actually cancel it and transfer whatever money's on it to a new card.
So I need one of those cards, because I'm having problems. We get on the bus, and you have 6 shekels,
5.90.
Yeah, 5.90, and I've run out of change, and you won't give me any more change, and you won't.
What do you mean? All the kids you have is for me.
You put me on your card. All you have is for me. Yesterday you put me on your card. I want to tell you that I appreciate it. But it's really interesting, because when you're in Israel, it's such a small place. When I say small, comparatively, what is it, like New Jersey? Would you say it's the size of New Jersey?
They say it's the size of New Jersey. Yeah.
But in this situation, you talk about the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom, and I'm getting back to this.
I want to back up and talk about the buses. So I understand, like, your ministry's on television, and you've got like jets that are fueling. Are you telling me we're riding the bus?
We're riding the bus.
Yes, people, we're riding the bus.
We're riding the bus. And actually, it's a humble, but it's also a way about being with the people here, because people travel here a lot. Not everybody has a car. In Israel, it's like the apartment situation. In Israel, it's apartments. That's basically, I'm going to Netanyahu's house. Okay, I'm going to go to Netanyahu's house. It's like going to the White House. I'm thinking. Yeah. And you say, and that's where he lives. And I'm like, no, that can't be where he lives.
It's an apartment
No,
building.
because that looks exactly like the place next to it, and the place next to it, he has an apartment.
Right. Well, he does live in a posh neighborhood, but he's got a duplex apartment.
Posh compared to other places, I'd be honest with you.
It's he's not living in a villa somewhere.
But anyway, 2 verse 1 says, "Now say to your brothers," if we can read this, say to your brothers, "Ami," and to your sisters, "Rahama."
Wait.
No,
How did you go past verse 2?
No, I thought I said verse 2.
Now, verse 2 is what in the English, isn't it?
No, so you're confused. I read 1:11. Oh, I see what happened.
You're confused.
Yeah, I'm confused.
Right.
I read
so 2:2 in the Hebrew is counted as chapter 1, verse 11.
That's okay. Please, would you
in English? So let's talk about 1:11.
Yeah,
2:2 in the Hebrew.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So first of all, we've got Judah and Israel being kibbutz together, and they shall place for themselves one head, and they shall go out of the land. And we actually, I think, read something like this in Ezekiel, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. In Ezekiel 34, I think that's what it was. So this concept of having one head, it's first of all, they will come up out of the land. That's this image of the second Exodus.
Yep.
Right, because Israel came up out of the land of Egypt. So now they're going to come up out of the land of the diaspora of exile or something like that. That's pretty cool. So Jeremiah, I want to read you Jeremiah 16. Oh, we just did that, didn't we? Jeremiah 16. Oh, but we didn't do these verses because they weren't in the section. Am I right? I believe so. So Jeremiah 16. I keep coming back to Jeremiah 16.
He loves Jeremiah 16.
Jeremiah 16, 14 to 15. Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord. I'm reading the King James. I can't stand that. I'm going to bring you JPS. Surely a time is coming, declares Yehovah, when it shall no longer be said, as Yehovah lives who brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt, but rather as Yehovah lives who brought the Israelites out of the northland, and out of all the lands to which he had banished them. For I will bring them back to the land which I gave to their fathers. So that's probably the clearest passage speaking about a second Exodus, so much so where it's saying you won't even refer to God anymore as the God who brought you out of Egypt. You're going to refer to God as the God who brought you out of exile. That's what it's referring to here, going up from the land, the second Exodus image. That Rosh Echad, that one head, that one leader, who is that? Mm-hmm. Who would you like? What is that one head?
It's got to be the one that's going to lead them. It's got to be the Messiah.
It's the Messiah.
Absolutely.
I think here's where we're on complete common ground. It will be the Messiah. And Ezekiel 34:23. And can I read that, or do you have something?
No, that's fine. Well, I do want to say something, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead while I'm bringing it up.
Well, here's what's interesting. When I actually see this now, this maybe I'm being too, I say esoteric here, but when I hear about the fact that it will come to a place where it's no longer talking about the God who brought them out of Egypt, but rather the God who brought them from the north and all those kinds of places, in our lifetime, and I know we talk a lot about this, but I want to go beyond saying our lifetime. Now when we talk about what God has done, isn't it interesting? Even in our conversation, we will say, and we've said it, go through our prophet pearls. You'll get all excited, Nehemia, and you'll say, right here in my own eyes, I'm watching prophecy fulfilled. And I've seen, and I got to tell you, I can go.
Is that what I sound like?
No, sometimes, look, you should see him with his little hat on. I'm telling you, when you're doing this, you're talking about it. And I got to say something.
Yeah.
As excited as you are, okay? Imagine the people before. This is the God who brought us out of Egypt. This is the God who brought us out of Egypt. And we're now seeing the shift. It's actually happening. We're talking about the God, and this sounds, maybe I'm being a little radical here. Taking a people out of Egypt, out of slavery, that is huge. It's amazing. Whoa, all these people come out. Getting people from all over parts of the world back to a country that wasn't a country. Like, we're seeing this in our lifetime.
It's amazing. It really is incredible.
No, seriously.
Well, and particularly, I've said this before, but the Jews coming out of the Soviet Union. Yeah. When I was a kid, every synagogue used to have a big sign in front, and it was a Jewish star, the Star of David, wrapped in chains. Mm-hmm. And that represented the Jews who were prisoners in the Soviet Union, over 1 million Jews. And now there's over 1 million Jews who came from the former Soviet Union and now live in Israel, and now it's the second generation already growing up. So
here's what I'm saying,
and that's the Northland, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing that the part of it that again I get to go outside. We'll go outside today after we take a break.
Yeah.
You give me 10 minutes? Do I get a 10-minute break? No, 10, 13, 15-minute break. But literally, when we get on that bus. We get on that bus and we look around, and every time I look around and I see all these different people and I see this is what they're saying. This is the God who brought us from all of these places back to the land. I mean, it's like longer will it be.
We're living prophecy here.
But I mean, we're seeing the shift. I mean, even Netanyahu, when he was a couple months ago, based on the timing here, a couple months ago, what did he say? He said, look, we're in 100 generations, we weren't able to protect ourselves. Now we're a people and we have our own land and we're protecting ourselves. He's saying that as prime minister, it's being fulfilled. What's happening here? That's what he's talking about. He's not saying, hey, we're the people that were brought out of the land of Egypt. No, we're the people that were brought from all of these lands, and now we're back and we're here.
And I'm vexed in a way because of that. Because, the world looks upon us and they said, oh, you're colonists from Europe. You're a foreign colony.
Have they not been to Israel and seen all the different people and all the different nations?
No, they haven't. In other words, but even the Jews who came from Europe, who returned from Europe, we're not colonists. We've been gathered, we've been kibbutzed back into this land, just like he promised. And imagine if we went back 3,500 years ago and we were watching on CNN or the BBC back then, and they would talk about the imperialist power of Joshua and his people who have colonized Canaan, and those foreigners, they should go back to Egypt.
Yeah, they've settled the land.
Excuse me,
yeah.
God gave us this land. It's His. He created it. And look, we were in exile and we're back now. It's not like we're some foreign people. This is our country. This is our land. I want to read you Ezekiel 34, 23 to 25. Then I will appoint a single shepherd over them to tend them. And again, we have here Ro'eh Echad, and there it's Rosh Echad, which is really interesting. Ro'eh is shepherd, and Rosh is head. And I love that word one. There's going to be one Messiah. I will appoint a single shepherd, and that's really significant here, especially in Hosea, because he lives at a time when there are two kings, there are two heads, one over Israel and one over Judah. He's saying, no, there's going to be one head, there's going to be one shepherd. There aren't going to be two kings. I'll appoint a single shepherd over them to tend them, and that one is really one. My servant David, he shall tend them, he shall be a shepherd to them. I, Yehovah, will be their God, and my servant David shall be a ruler among them. I, Yehovah, have spoken, and I will grant them a covenant of friendship. I will banish vicious beasts, etc., etc. Okay, so there we have this idea of Yehovah is going to be our God. We will be His people, and we will have the Messiah. I mean, look at that. That's a lot. That's quite
interesting because you're saying this, and I know a lot of people know that's the case. There is common ground between people from different backgrounds in terms of their hope. Their hope in terms of Messiah ruling, being appointed by God. And, again, there's a battle. I was talking to a very dear friend of mine just real time here. And he was talking about that. He said, there's so many people that get on him about who he talks to and his connections and all that. And he says, and there's a lot of things where there is no connection, but then there are a lot of things where there is connection. And what's one of the major connections is that everyone is saying, boy, what will that be like the day when he sets up his Messiah? There's not going to be any argument then. It's going to be real clear.
One more passage, and this is homework. We're not going to read it because we want to move on. But Ezekiel 37, verses 24 through 28. And what are all the common elements in these different passages? We've got one leader. It's the Davidic Messiah, the Messiah from the line of David. There's this concept that we will be His people and He will be our God. We've got this covenant and dwelling in safety. We've got these, I count those as 5 elements that are in all of these different prophecies. And that's pretty cool. It's not just, there's that one Messiah thing. No, there's a whole bunch of things in common there.
Amen.
Yeah.
And I am confused now because I've got my computer open. I've got on English on the left side, 2 verse 1, and I got on Hebrew on the right side. And I have to be honest with you, I'm still trying to figure out when it is that they're going to match, because eventually they match.
Right.
And I don't know what verse it is when they match.
I don't know either. So chapter 2, verse 3 in the Hebrew is chapter 2, verse 1 in the English.
Yep.
If you're in the English, look at 2:1. If you're in the Hebrew, look at 2:3. What do we got?
Say to your brothers, we already said this, Ami, and to your sisters, Rahama. And again, that's referring...
Which means what? Yeah. My people, and how did they translate Ruchama? Ruchama is that which there is mercy upon.
Mercy
it's
upon.
a passive word. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Go on.
Contend with your mother, for she is not my wife, and I am not her husband. and let her put away her harlotry from her face and her adultery from between her breasts. That's what it says here in the English.
Yeah, that's what it says.
And, you know, when you're reading this and you're going backwards, like we said historically, from a context standpoint, what it was Hosea did. Now, I talked about Ezekiel being like this prophet of tragedy, and Jeremiah, you know, I love Jeremiah. He just seems to be like, I don't know how to say it. Seems the most regular guy. I don't know why I say that. But Hosea is just, I cannot wrap my mind around what it was that he had to do. Even though, as we see, in other words, it's not just imagery. It doesn't say, now take this stick and this stick means this. No, take this wife who's a prostitute, and that's his wife. I mean, and I can't.
Look, can we use this term? He basically is using, and many of the prophets have what we might call witnessing tools.
Yeah.
And like, you know, Jeremiah takes the yoke.
Yeah, and puts
and he puts it on. The guy breaks it. He takes another yoke.
Yep.
All right. So that's like something you're doing during your day job, and then you go home and you're done. This guy, his life is prophecy.
Exactly.
His witnessing tool is his entire life.
His entire life. I mean, his children.
Who he marries, his children.
I mean, we're talking. I mean, I don't.
Wow.
So, yeah. Anyway,
wow.
So it's going to be a pick and choose here as we go through, because he's talking about. It says
so much.
And 2:3 says, "Or I will strip her naked and expose her as on the day when she was born. I will also make her like a wilderness, make her like desert land, and slay her with thirst." Now, so who is he talking about? In other words, is this supposed to remind us as we're reading this of Hosea and his situation? Is there a transition here? Like when you're,
so in this passage, I think Hosea's prostitute wife and his children are symbols of what's going to happen between God and Israel. Mm. So here we're really talking about Israel, and the mother is the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, and saying, "Look, you gotta repent, or you're going to have problems."
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, it says, "I will also have no compassion on her children, because they are children of harlotry. For their mother has played the harlot; she who conceived them has." And again, let's be clear here. We've talked about what does it look like for her to play the harlot, and what does it look like in terms of the false gods and the the nations and all that sort of thing. And so it doesn't take a whole lot of creativity to figure out what's going on here. For she said, "I will go after my lovers who give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink." And these are the things that actually are representative of how you survive. Mm-hmm. I mean, bread and water, you got to have bread and water, and my flax and my wool, and how you keep them warm, and oil in my drink. And that basically that's what she's doing. And she's saying, it's not God, it's not Yehovah who's providing. I'm going after these false lovers, these idols, these
Well, I think there's
nations.
two false lovers, two types of false lovers. One is the foreign nations.
Yep.
Particularly in this period, it would be Egypt and Assyria, or other nations around them. And then the other one is going to be, as you said, idols.
Yep.
In other words, did you get was it God who gave you what you have, or was it some foreign nation, or was it some foreign god? And I can't, we're pre-recording this, and we just the other day heard Netanyahu speak before the American Congress, and I heard this interview with this. Can I talk about this? I heard an interview with one of Obama's advisors, and the guy is one of the most arrogant people I've ever seen. I don't even remember the guy's name. He was actually a Jew, and he was, and I think they probably chose him as the token Jew to speak against Netanyahu. And he was saying how Netanyahu is the client state, and he needs to seek our favor. And basically, that's what he said. And it was the context of, they said, well, Netanyahu disrespected Obama, and the interviewer said, well, what about Obama disrespecting Netanyahu? And the response of this token Jew is to say, the client state needs to seek needs to make sure that the super, and he used the term client state, I believe, or something like that, needs to make sure the relationship with the superpower is intact, and not the other way around. And I'm thinking, like, this guy is Babylon. This guy is the king of Egypt. And Israel needs to take a step back. Netanyahu needs to take a step back and say, I trust in Yehovah and not in the United States of America. And look, I could explain to you from a very practical point of view how that could be very advantageous. But certainly from a perspective of faith, we need to trust in Yehovah, the creator of the universe, and not in some foreign power.
Okay. We got out of that one. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up her way with thorns, and I will build a wall against her, though she cannot find her path. And what are these paths? It says, So she will pursue her lovers, but she will not overtake them. That's what it says here in English. She won't reach them. She won't get to them. And she will seek them. And when I see phrases like this, I always think about seeking. They seek him but not find him. She will seek them but not find them. Then comes the verse.
Yeah.
Then she will say, I will go back to my first husband, for it was better for me then than now. Wow. Who's her first husband?
Jehovah.
Amen. Amen. I mean, and you know, it's interesting because when you look at the imagery, husband, wife, the lovers, the false gods, all these things. I mean, it isn't hard to be able to understand why these images are the way that they are and what we're talking about. So he's speaking about the first husband being God. For she does not know, and this is back to this issue earlier about saying where is she going to get her oil or bread and her water and her oil and her flax. She does not know that it was I who gave her the grain, the new wine, and the oil, and lavished on her silver and gold. And then it says, which they used for Baal. Who's not a real God? It's not a real God. I mean, it's like, you know, I just got to ask you a question. Sometimes I wonder when I'm reading scripture, when does God's patience just say, you know what, enough is enough? When does he just say, enough is enough? When is that going to happen?
Yeah.
Or does he ever say enough is enough? And then when I think he does say enough is enough, he has these words and phrases. But I will not forget her. I will bring her back. I will do this. And it's like, what an amazing, man. Who is this God that has that kind of patience?
Yeah.
That has that kind of mercy and that kind of love and that kind of care that would just say, yeah, you did all of this.
He sure is merciful, I'll tell you that.
Man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. Verse 9. Can we say verse 9?
Which is verse 11 in the Hebrew.
Okay. And you know what? You got to read verse 9 in the English, 11 in the Hebrew. You probably got some other translation. What do you see there?
Okay, we're in Jeremiah chapter 2.
We're in Hosea. You're clearly getting tired.
Hosea chapter 2. Verse 9, 7 in the English. I'll read you from the JPS, which in the JPS it actually is the same as the Hebrew. Pursue her lovers as she will. She shall not overtake them. And seek them as she may. She shall never find them. Then she will say, I will go. We just read this. I will go and return to my first husband, for then I fared better than now. Next verse 10, and in the Hebrew 10. Yeah. And she did not consider this. I know we just read this. Verse 11. It's funny.
No,
so
we're really interesting. We're connected. 2:10 and 2:10 are the same. Are they not?
No. This is where the confusion is. So 2:9 in the English is 11 in the Hebrew, which is why it was 2 verses off.
Okay, got you.
Okay, now 2:11, which is 2:9 in the English. Assuredly I will take back my new grain in its time and my new wine in its season, and I will snatch away my wool and my linen that served to cover her nakedness. Now I will uncover her shame in the very sight of her lovers, and none shall save her from me. We got to stop at that.
Okay,
wow. Good. Can we talk about
Please,
that?
Please, yes.
All right. So first of all, we've got 2 words for salvation that we've talked about. There's lehoshia from the verb yud shin ayin, Yeshua, and the other is lehatzil from the root nun sadi line, which means to rescue. They're both sometimes translated as to save, both sometimes translated as to rescue. Here, this is a really interesting statement. So, what man would try to save Israel from Jehovah's hand? I mean, you know, what human savior would purport to even try? So, what's your take on that? I mean, it says no man will save her from my hand. You know, so who would even what does that even mean? Who would even try? Can I tell you what comes to mind for me?
Okay.
So, in Jewish history, you had these figures people who claimed to be the Messiah, and they were false messiahs. And I don't know if you know this, somebody actually wrote a really interesting book called 50 Jewish Messiahs.
I do know about that.
And in the book, he says there's a lot more than 50, but it sounded like the good title for a book. And one that comes to mind is in the year 1172, there was this man in Yemen. And we actually don't even know his name, but we know a lot about the story. He proclaimed that he was the Messiah, and he was going to lead Israel out of Yemen back to the land of Israel. And at one point in this whole story, he appears before the Sultan of Yemen. You know, it's a Muslim Arab country, and he appears before the king, who's called the Sultan. And the Sultan doesn't know. He's like, "What are you talking about? You know, you're some little Jewish tribe in my country. you want to leave and you want to defeat me? And what? Yep. And he said, I can prove that I'm the Messiah. How could he prove he's the Messiah? He said, cut off my head and you'll see I'll still be alive. I'll come back to life. And so the Sultan cut his head off, and needless to say, he didn't come back to life.
And his disciples, what?
So his disciples then said, okay, this is not the Messiah.
Okay. Wow.
Although there were actually some who still apparently followed him and thought one day he would reappear. But anyway, I hear this, and maybe I'm reading into it, but I think, no man can save Israel from my hand. And I think there have been people who thought they could, out of their own power come and save Israel. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't do it. Only the true Messiah will be able to do that.
Amen. May it be soon.
Verse 13, which is 11 in the English.
Okay. Now, here's where I want to stop a little bit. Because it says here in the English, it says, and this is where I have to tell you, Nehemia, on a casual reading, there are a lot of people, there are people that would go to this verse and they would connect it, this verse, and saying what he will put an end to, and say that relates to present day. It says, I will also put an end to all of, and the word that they use here in English is all of her gaiety, but in Hebrew it's masos,
which is celebration.
Yeah, celebrations, and
happiness,
her feasts, which are her hogs. By the way, as we're here today, it's interesting. I've heard this probably 15 times in the last, 20 times maybe in the last 20 hours, where someone will say Hag Sameach, and there's happy feast, and they're talking about Purim. Mm-hmm. Now, for those that don't know, yesterday, which would have been the 14th, was for the unwalled cities, where people began to celebrate Purim, and tonight, which is the 15th, the evening of the 15th, I guess that you'd say, is Purim for the walled cities. So in Jerusalem tonight, after we're done, we're going to be actually going out, Nehemia and I, and we're going to celebrate. We're going to be with the people. But what's really, really interesting is that so someone could read this verse, and it says, and I will just take it out of context. Read this verse and say, I will put an end to all of her masos and her
all of her
feast,
celebrations,
all of her hogs, all of her hodesh,
new moons.
Hodesh and her Sabbaths, and all of her appointed times. And someone could now tell me, could this happen?
Yeah,
someone could go to this verse.
Yeah,
and say, when we say, it's a great opportunity to celebrate God's Sabbaths or his Moedim, and they could take this verse and put it out and say, God says he's going to put an end to all of that. And say that that's exactly what he's talking about here. So the question that has to be asked is, what's the difference? These are the same words. What's the difference about what she was doing that he's going to put an end to, and what he called for people to actually follow? Yeah. In other words, what do we know that would let us know how her new moons and her Sabbaths and her hogs and her Moedim is the kind of thing that he puts an end to?
Yeah, well, so she clearly was sinning. And she's worshiping idols, and she is, going after other nations, and and so in that context, he's saying, look, you want just the happy parts, the good parts, the fun parts.
So do you think these are the same things? In other words, her heart's wrong, her actions are wrong.
I think this is no different than we read about. You bring in the sacrifices, but then you're sinning. Okay, and so I don't want your sacrifices if you're going to sin, and I think that's the context here. I don't want these Shabbats, new moons, the Moedim, Chagim, if you're going to be sinning. Don't do this and sin at the same time.
So we can't put this on something else. These are actually the same things.
Oh, I think so. No question about it.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
I mean, what else could they be?
I'm just saying, someone could say, well, maybe there's some mother, maybe she's taking some.
Oh, is this the false feast?
The also false feast. Yes.
Oh, no. Yeah. And I think there's definitely a play on words here. In the verse, in the beginning of 13, the first word in Hebrew is vihishbati. Mm-hmm. I will put an end to, in your English, is actually I will Sabbath.
I will Sabbath.
Means I'm going
to rest these things.
I'm going to rest these things. Look, we're not doing these now. We're going to take a break. I'm going to put you in the corner, take a break, and you're not going to be allowed to celebrate Shabbat until you
start
behaving.
This be the word of the week. Come on.
Okay, the word Vehishbati, and the root of the word is Shabbat, which is Shin Bet Tav. We've got something here a little complicated. We're not going to get into it, but basically, it's I will cause to.
What do you mean we're not going to get into it? We have to get into. Tell them what it is. This is really cool. I mean, a cause. It's the Hifil verb.
It's the Hifil verb. I will cause to cease.
Amen.
Right, but then we have something else which is kind of cool. I don't know if you noticed this. So the suffix for I for I in Hebrew, and particularly for this form of the verb, is T.
Yep.
But then there's the tav, which is part of the root. So it should have been v'hishbatati. V'hishbatati. Yeah. And instead it's v'hishbati, and that's called assimilation. That's a very common thing that happens in language, where the two T's coalesce as one, and v'hishbatati becomes v'hishbati. Even though v'hishbatati is perfectly good Hebrew, you can say that too. It's pretty cool. Wow, cool. That was a complicated thing. But the root is shin bet tav, which is to cause, to rest, to cease. It's the same root as Shabbat. And if we're already talking about this, since you brought this up, can we talk about, just real quick, I want to bring a verse here in Exodus chapter 12, verse 15. And it says, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. 12:15. You should eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. And the word for remove is tashbitu. You will Sabbath the leaven from your houses. And that doesn't mean it's going to end permanently. It just means during those 7 days, we got to put a rest to the leaven. Put it outside, get rid of it, give it a rest. And that really is maybe how we can translate this if we want in a sort of loose way. Look, I'm going to give your Shabbats, your Chagim, and your new moons and your Moadim, I'm going to give them a rest.
Yeah, that's because we got some other issues we need to deal with.
We got to deal with those other issues. We're going to put these on the side. We're going to give it a rest, and then we're going to focus on these issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I think we're getting close to being on the same verse. No, not really.
I don't know.
All right, where are we at in English? 2:12.
So in Hebrew, we're in 2:14.
Okay.
In English, 2:12. Go ahead.
I will destroy her vines and fig trees, of which she said, these are my wages, which my lover hath given me, and I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field will devour them. I will punish her for the days of the Baals, when she used to offer sacrifices to them, and adorn herself with earrings and jewelry, and follow her lovers, so that she forgot me, declares Yehovah. And some people would use this verse to say, and this is another example, where they'd use this verse, and some denominations would come along and say a woman must never wear earrings and jewelry, and say this verse would be the reason for it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Not take completely out of context, saying, here's an example in Hosea 2:13. And again, the person wouldn't look at the big picture, but they would say, here's what she would do. She adorned herself with earrings and jewelry doing that. Therefore, you must never wear earrings.
So now let's talk about the context, the cultural context, historical context. When it says adorn herself with earrings and jewelry, what was the sin? That those were pieces of jewelry that were dedicated to Baal. In other words, you'd wear a little earring, and the earring would have, I don't know, it might have even had a statue of Baal on it, a little image of Baal.
Yeah.
Or if in any event it was something that was dedicated to Baal, and everyone would see her and say, oh, she went to the temple last week and dedicated her ear to Baal, or dedicated that, thing to Baal. And that's the context here.
But so there's nothing innately wrong with an earring,
right?
And or jewelry. But we actually see another examples of this when they would say, okay, I'm going to put all in there, say I belong to, and that's a representation in a picture.
Well, can I go out on a limb and suggest, and this isn't as clear in the text.
How big of a limb is it going to be?
It's not that big of a limb.
Okay.
So it's also possible that the earring and different jewelry here is not literal but symbolic in the sense that when you would marry somebody, the betrothal gift was to give them an earring or give them a nose ring. We see that, for example, in Genesis,
we do.
where he gives her, jewelry. And so maybe this is jewelry that symbolically, or perhaps even literally, represents a marriage with Baal, because Baal also means husband, and that will tie into what we're about to see. You're proclaiming yourself to be married to Baal, and you've forgotten me. I'm your real husband.
So if I give my wife a little earring for her nose.
Yeah.
So there's nothing necessarily. I mean, I could
not biblically nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Do you know where I can get such a thing?
I'm sure you can get it right here in Jerusalem, all over the place.
I don't think she would do it. She's tough on me when it comes to that sort of thing.
Okay.
But if I get her like a diamond ring, she'd probably wear it.
Let's move on. What? What verse are we in?
If only I could afford it. You got me on the bus. Therefore, behold, verse 14. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, bring her into the wilderness, and speak kindly to her. This is really interesting.
Yeah.
Then I will give her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor as a door of hope. I got to stop for a second, Nehemia. Sometimes this is where it really does get difficult when you're going through the prophets, because every phrase, every couple words, or every little section of a sentence has meaning. So look, so we could get through this really quick and say, and I will give her vineyards from there. And the valley of Achor, what is that? As a door of hope, what is that? Just that line right there, we could stop and unpack that and really it becomes an issue of how much time do we have, what can we do, how far do we want to go, how deep do we want to go. But what I really do want to challenge people to do, and I really mean this, is if we don't address an issue, that doesn't mean it's not important. That just means we don't have the time, but it really is something. I think
and here's something where people could really easily go and look up what is a Achor.
Yes.
Where is the Valley of Achor? You'll find it in Joshua and Chronicles, and go look that up.
As a door of hope. And she will sing there as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she came up, here it comes again, from the land of Egypt.
Yeah. Just one more thing about the door of hope, which you won't see in the English, is that in Hebrew that phrase is Petach Tikva. And that's the name of a town today in Israel called Petach Tikva. It was named after this verse, a door of hope.
Now, I will say this. Now, you're gonna stick your chest out here and say, "Oh, I've got a teaching on this, and I remember when I did this teaching, and we already talked about this." But you know what? This next verse is a game changer, don't you think? Isn't this verse a game changer?
You make fun of my teaching.
No, I'm not making fun of your teaching. I know what you're going to do. I've got a teaching on this. And all right.
So I actually talk about these next couple verses in my book, Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence. There's a teaching on it. I did it at... why are you making fun of me?
I told you.
It's a great teaching.
No, it's a wonderful
It's one of the best teachings I've ever done.
No, it really is. But no, this is a game changer, this verse.
No, it's a key verse. And to fully contextualize it, go online to YouTube, and there's a teaching there. I did it at, I think, El Shaddai in Tacoma, and it's up there on my YouTube channel. So go look for Nehemia Gordon on YouTube, and you can find the teaching. It's about I think it's called something like spiritual mixing of seed is the name of the topic, and this is one of the key verses. I think it's a key verse in the entire Tanakh. But yeah,
So go ahead.
Why is it? Tell me why it's a game changer.
No.
Tell me your teaching. They can go to YouTube and hear mine.
Mine
What's your teaching?
No, I don't have a teaching.
Oh, okay.
No. This has been a verse for me that's been really, really important.
Yeah.
And the reason this verse has been so important to me is because the English does something really, really interesting.
Okay.
In Hebrew, so normally we'd have this conversation back and forth, and I'm like the Methodist, so what does it say in the Hebrew? And then you look and say, but even if you're an English reader, this is what's so cool to me about this verse. If you're just an English reader, you don't have any Hebrew background whatsoever, the English Bible does something really interesting. Now, I don't know if there are some there are some translations that don't do it. I would like to know if there are translations that don't do it. But is it not interesting to you that the English, when it gets to the word that you will call me Ishi and will no longer call me Baali, that the English decides to actually bring the Hebrew? The English doesn't bring the English. The English brings the Hebrew. Okay. And I'm talking about, so tell me, is it different? Is the Hebrew word Ishi different? In other words, I'm looking in the English Bible here, that you will call me Ishi. What does it say in Hebrew?
Ishi.
There's got to be a difference.
Nope.
No, wait a whole stop. No, this is really a big deal.
Can I read it in Hebrew?
No, I'd love for you to read it in Hebrew.
I'll read it slowly and listen for the words Ishi and Baali.
Yes.
V'haya vayom hahu ne'um Yehovah tikre'i Ishi v'lo tikre'i li od Baali.
Yes. Now, I want you, Nehemia, to take a moment and talk about your teaching. And then I'd like to say something.
Well, so let me translate it literally. And it shall come to pass on that day, says Yehovah, you will call my husband, and you will not call me anymore my husband. And you read that, this is
you
why
just translated it.
This is why I couldn't translate it in the English. Because it makes no sense in English.
It makes no sense.
So instead,
say it again. I want you to say it in English.
You will call me my husband, and you will no longer call me my husband.
Crisis.
Right.
The English translators have a crisis.
Right. And really what it has is two different words for husband.
Exactly.
Now, that E ending in Ishi and Baali means my. So you will no longer call me my Ish. Sorry, you will no longer call me by Baal, you will call me my Ish. And what's the difference? Both of those words mean husband. But what Israel was doing is they were calling Yehovah by the name Baal. They were saying, yes, we worship the Lord.
You're making that up, Nehemia. There's no such verse with it.
I've got lots of them. It's in the teaching. Okay. But we're not going to go into all those right now. Yeah. In fact, I'm specifically not going to bring those verses because I want people to go and listen to the teaching. It's free on YouTube. You can listen to it. One of the best teachings I've ever done. Spiritual mixing of seed. Anyway, so it shall come to pass in that day, and we'll post the link if we remember on the page along with this teaching, along with this prophet pearls. So you'll no longer call me my husband. You'll no longer call me my husband. You will call me my husband. What's that about? So Israel was in this covenant relationship with the Creator of the universe, and saying Israel said about God, He's our husband. We're married to Him. And the Hebrew word for husband is ish, but it's also Baal, which also means master, just like we say in English, mister. And the point was they were saying, well, if God's our husband, well, Baal means husband, and Baal is the god of the Canaanites. Mm-hmm. So Yehovah is Baal. Mm-hmm. And there are verses that talk about this.
Yes.
In fact, we're going to go and have dinner today in a place called Emek Rephaim, the Valley of Rephaim. And one of the places we're going to walk by, and maybe we'll even go to if we have time, is called Baal Pratzim.
Yeah.
And go look at the teaching, and you'll see about that. Mm-hmm. Anyway. And then he says, and I will remove the names of the Baals from her mouth, and they will no longer mention them by name. Mm-hmm. That means they were referring to Yehovah as Baal and mentioning the name of Baal. Mm-hmm. And so this is actually really different than what we saw with Elijah on Mount Carmel. Elijah on Mount Carmel is there were two different gods, Yehovah and Baal. And he says, if you're going to worship Yehovah, worship Yehovah. If you're going to worship Baal, choose him. Mm-hmm. But you can't have both. Here what they've done is something a lot more subtle, more nuanced, maybe more insidious, is that they've identified Yehovah as Baal. And that's why I call it spiritual mixing of seed. Mm-hmm. They've taken the counterfeit and superimposed it over the real to the point where they probably couldn't even tell the difference. Mm-hmm. He's saying in the end time, I'm going to remove the name of the Baals from their mouth. I'll no longer mention them by name. Mm-hmm. And that is reminiscent of Exodus 23, verse 13, where it says, all that I am telling you you shall guard, and the names of other gods you shall not mention, nor shall it be heard upon your mouth. Mm-hmm. And that's what they were doing. They were calling on Yehovah, and they were saying, look, we worship the Lord. We worship we have got our husband relationship between Israel. That's Baal. And what they were doing is it's called syncretism. They were mixing the two religions and creating this unholy hybrid. And in some ways that's much more dangerous and more confusing than going and worshiping a completely different God.
It's something because you took this verse and you used it as it pertains to the spiritual mixing scene. I actually used this verse a little bit different. In the first book that I wrote, His Hallowed Name Revealed Again, I actually, in that book, I had a goal, and the goal was to give people a chance to actually interact with the information, to see it for themselves. And many, many people said what they appreciated about it is sometimes it was a really complicated topic that was made a little bit more easy for people to understand because they would apply it. This verse is one that I think is the gold standard for when the English translators run up against some issues where they can't deny the fact that it's dealing with a different language. The Hebrew Bible is the basis for the English, and sometimes, and this is unfortunate, many people that I've known over time that didn't even know that English wasn't the original. They thought that the King James Version was the original version of Scripture. In other words, if you ask them, and I'm not trying to make fun of them, because I really, my heart feels sad for them. They weren't exposed to anything else, and so when they read, when they heard the words, I am the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, they believed that that's exactly what God spoke in that language until they learned it was a different language, and then they had to take a further step to find out, so how do I have access to that language? Mm-hmm. So I want to use this verse as a ministry minute if I can.
Please.
Because I've really been struggling, Nehemia, and I've talked to you about this a few times. I'm going to take my time through this. I've talked to you about this a few times where I've really had a challenge with trying to help people have access to the actual information. What you did that I think is really powerful, and I'm not just saying this to say it and how much I appreciate it, but you basically said, okay, if you're willing to go through the work, you can have access to the information. What has shocked me, let me say it more clearly. What has really, really surprised me in the last 7 to 8 years is how many people are teaching what they want to say the Hebrew roots of their faith, but they weren't interacting with the actual Hebrew language. And I want to say this shocked me. And I would go to some of the teachers and I would say, okay, well, so what do you do about the fact that it's in this particular, grammatical structure? And they'd say, I don't know because I don't read it. I don't read it in that way. And I'm like, okay, well, that's
what do you
okay.
mean they don't read it?
No, they don't read it. They're not reading the Hebrew. They're not actually looking at the actual.
Are you
original.
telling there's people who are teaching Hebrew?
People, absolutely.
And the secrets
not
of
only
Hebrew,
Hebrew,
they don't even read Hebrew?
Not even Hebrew. I'm talking about teaching going further. And I want to be really sensitive because this is really important what I'm about to say. Mm-hmm. So for all of these years, Nehemia, I've said I've been shocked when people were saying, well, the meaning of this word is, as it pertains to God's name or God's feast or whatever, and they would begin to go on and on and on. And then when I would talk to them, I'd say, so tell me, what do you do with the text on this? And they say, well, I don't know because I don't read the Hebrew. Now, one of the challenges has been, they would say, well, Nehemia might read the Hebrew, but he's not a believer. He can't help us. And there's been arguments back and forth. So what have I been struggling with? And I really want to take my time on this. I've been struggling with finding ways to give people access to the information in bite-sized portions. So in the first book, His Hallowed Name Revealed Again, there's 200 and some notes, all of that stuff, and a lot of it is based in the Hebrew where people can actually check for themselves. Then there was a next step, which was the whole Time Will Tell series and all of the videos that we did that many times used the sources, but it was in an engaging fashion. It wasn't that they would necessarily learn it, but they would see it. Then the next thing we did, which I think was huge in 2014, is we did a series called Scripture Bites. We took the 10 Commandments series plus 4 other scriptural passages, one Isaiah 56, where people could actually learn what's behind the English. And people were excited because they said, wow, I get to see, this is what it says in Hebrew. But it was a next step. Now I'm making another decision. And this decision is really a big one because they're listening to it this week, which is actually the week of Shavuot.
Is it?
It's the week of Shavuot. And on this week...
This is assuming we find the Aviv.
Assuming that the Aviv is found. But even if the Aviv isn't found also in the church, Pentecost happens to fall at the same time as the rabbinic Shavuot, which I believe is around May 25th, something like that. Here comes the big announcement. As a result,
May 24th.
Of May 24th.
And this is read in the synagogue on May 23rd.
Okay, awesome. Nehemia, now I want you to be the first to hear this, though the people are, well, now you're not really the first, but you're the first publicly to hear this, is that what I've decided is that I want, well, a verse like this where it says that you will call me Ishi and no longer call me Baali. Many people will read that and they don't have any idea what Ish is. They don't have any idea what the E is. They have no idea what the E at the end is. And you do a great job. And this is the suffix and this is and you try your best to give it to them. But one of the things that I want to do is give people beginning level ability to interact with the Hebrew. So on this weekend, people will be able to, and I want this first to be to the group of people that will test it. Now, you remember, this is a funny story. This is one of my funniest stories. So I wrote my little book, my little study. Remember, this goes down in history. And in the little study, I would say to Nehemia, you got to read the study. And he'd open it up for 2 pages and he'd shut it. And it would offend me. And he'd say, oh, your little study. But you, over time, you said something to me. And I really want to tell you how much I appreciate this. You said, Keith, what you were able to do is to take the information that's very complicated and make it simple. And I want to tell you how much I appreciated it.
Explain it in a simple way.
And explain it in a simple way. So as of this weekend, we have an audio course for beginning Hebrew.
Wow.
A beginning Hebrew audio course, and it's in the spirit of Scripture Bites. It's Scripture Bites, Biblical Hebrew for beginners is what I say. It's a biblical Hebrew course. And what it is, it's going to be a chance for people, and it's going to be starting the premium content library. Why? Because we want a controlled group of people to go through the course and give us their input, put their comments. Does it make sense? Is it too complicated? Is it too easy? Is it too simple? And literally, it's going to be launched on this weekend. Now, here's the challenge. You're listening to this weekend. The challenge is we got a lot of work to do before that. Now, I've already done a couple of them, had people look at it, but the general sense is that people want a chance to learn biblical Hebrew, but they don't want to get overwhelmed. They want to take a bite at a time. And so this is a Scripture Bites, Biblical Hebrew for beginners, and the ability for people to understand it little by little. How many lessons there will be, I'm not sure. But this weekend, you can go to bfainternational.com, front page. You're going to see the little banner, and it's going to say Biblical Hebrew there, Scripture Bites, Biblical Hebrew, and you're going to click it. Go in there, and for people that are in the premium content library, you're going to help us make this, just like with my first book, input from all these different people. And then by the end of the Prophet Pearls section, we'll make it public for everybody so that they've got it. So you're going to help us develop it. But I'm under pressure, and it's a good pressure, and I appreciate it, to basically bring what I've been saying for some years. How do you bring this information and put it in a palatable way? You make it bite-sized. And so that's what we're going to do with Biblical Hebrew. I don't know if I'll ever get you a chance to look at it, but hopefully, the people that are listening that want to learn a little bit more and understand it for themselves, this is going to be an introductory way for them to have a practical way to understand the language, actual biblical Hebrew, where they can open their Hebrew Bible and read it. I'm very excited about it, but I will say, if you're hearing it this weekend, there's been an amazing movement of God's Spirit between now, today, Purim, and the time that this happens. But I know it's going to happen. So thank you very much for letting me make the announcement. Now, every week, you're going to hear about this until the end of Prophet Pearls. That's my announcement.
I can't wait.
Oh, boy. We must never let Nehemia read it. No, that's not the right suffix there. That's the wrong.
Right.
And we need that. We do need that.
Wonderful.
Because we want people
That's
to
great.
know what
I
it
love
is.
that you're open to correction.
Yes.
And, come before Yehovah in humility instead of,
we got the answer.
I figured it out. I've got the secret.
No. I learned that.
All right. So anyway, nehemiaswall.com is my website, and I love that this is the weekend of Shavuot. When this is being broadcast, it will be exactly a year since I actually began a project, which was the support team studies. I've had people who have supported my ministry in the past, and decided I'm going to start putting out these studies as a way of saying thank you for the support team. And it's really taken on a life of its own. But the first one I did was on the topic of Shavuot. I called it the Feast of Oaths. And I shared some things that I learned really over the last almost like a lifetime. And it was one of the things I realized as I was doing this. At the time, I was teaching high school in China, and I had these 15-year-old students. And I realized 15 years old is a lifetime for those students. And that's why I in humility came before God and said, okay, what have I learned in the last lifetime, in the last 15 years? And I shared some of the things I learned about Shavuot. And and really some life-changing things. And so that you can get that, go to nehemiaswall.com and sign up for the support team. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter, which you can get on the side of the page there. You can click on a little thing and put in your email and get the free weekly newsletter. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to the weekly the podcasts, whether they're weekly or whatever they are. Go to iTunes or your favorite podcast program and subscribe to Nehemia's Wall podcast.
And I want to say something about both situations. One of the things that's really kind of interesting is that we've got levels of people that see everything you have. Like you say, going to YouTube, that's nothing. You don't have to register. You just go there and you can see that.
Yeah.
We have lots of things like that.
Yeah.
We have things that for people to register where they can be on the newsletters, either newsletter, and then you have the like the support team or premium content library. And what I really love about that is it gives people a chance to sort of enter in taking steps and how far they want to go. And yet at the same time, there is this way of people saying, I want a little bit more. And again, that's what we're trying to do, is to develop those kinds of things where for those who want more and that want to go to that deeper level, that can be there, but in integrity, where there can actually be some input. So it is kind of exciting to know. We're coming to Shavuot. I can't wait to talk. We'll keep going in here, but Shavuot happened to be the time that I met you, Nehemia. That's right. When I came. So for all those years later, I think it was at 2002, and now it's 2015. So how many years is that?
13.
13 years. You got to be kidding me. We've known each other that long.
That's a lifetime, isn't it?
That's almost 15 years.
This is our bar mitzvah. Our bar mitzvah.
So what verse are we on here?
Last verse.
Okay. Which is verse?
Which is, or is it the last verse?
No, it's not really
confused. All right, hold on a second. No, it's
not the last verse.
2:21 and 22, which in English is I don't know what it is in English. So maybe it's not the same. Oh, it's 2:19 and 20 in the English.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So can you read that?
Yes, I will betroth you to me. I will betroth you to me just for a little while. No, it says le'olam. It says I will betroth you to me forever. Yes, I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice. And here comes that word again, chesed, in loving kindness and in compassion. Wow. And doesn't that remind you, when you see compassion, doesn't that remind you of what we just talked about? So that's what he says. And I will betroth you.
It's rachamim, which is related to the word ruchama and lo ruchama.
Yes, actually.
Yeah.
So I will betroth you to me in faithfulness. Then you will know Yehovah. Yeah, it's really interesting, Nehemia. Here's that little et. I kind of like this. It's in Hosea 2:22 in the Hebrew, and in Hosea 2:20 in the English. Yeah. And I'm not going to go into any detail about it, but it's just another example where when you can know some little information, you either have to let that information be consistent. You can't pick and choose. It's either got to be a consistent concept that you apply, or you, like I said, you can't pick and choose. And here's an example where it says, I will know you, and then right before the word Yehovah is two little letters, an aleph and a tav, which is the et, which has got to do with the direct object, but sometimes is used and misused, mistranslated, and I think you even have a study on that too. So.
I do? I don't even know. So I want to ask a question on this.
Yes.
This is a really interesting. This is. And can we go out of the box here and read three more verses just real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you read those verses?
20, and it will come
23
about
to 25 in the Hebrew. I guess it's, I don't know, the next three whatever those are in the English.
I don't think
21,
it's out of the deal because
it is. No, I'm looking right now, and in Hebrew it goes to verse 22, which is verse 20 in the English. I know this is confusing.
And that's the end of a section too. Nehemia.
No,
it's the end of a paragraph.
But
it's a minor break right there at the end of 22 in
Hebrew. But it's part of the whole. We got to read verses 21 to 23.
Okay.
Just to wrap up with the whole Jezreel thing. I feel like.
Okay.
And it shall come to pass in that day, I will hear, saith Jehovah, I will hear the heavens, and they shall hear the earth. And the earth shall hear the corn and the wine and the oil, and they shall hear Jezreel. And I will sow her unto me in the earth. And I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. And I will say to them which were not my people, thou art my people, and they shall say, thou art my God. Now, what does that have to do with what we just read? Because, first of all, Jezreel is the name of the city, and here there's a play on words. He says, Zaratiha, I will sow her. And Israel means God will sow, to sow seed. So I will sow her unto me means I'm gonna plant the seed unto her, and that essentially is God saying Jezreel, which is this rebellious city, is going to become a symbol of my relationship with Israel. And then it goes on and it says, and I will say concerning Lo Ruchama, that is the name of his daughter, or symbolically Israel, that I had mercy upon her. I had Richamti, I had Rachamim on her. And I will say of Lo Ami, Amiata, you are my people. So we can't just skip this verse. I mean, it's key for the whole first two chapters of Hosea. I love that passage, but I do want to ask a question about this betrothal statement. It's really interesting. He says, "I will betroth you to me." Let me read it in Hebrew. Ve'arastich li leolam, I will betroth you to me forever. Ve'arastich li b'tzedek u'b'mishpat u'b'chesed v'rachamim, and I will betroth you to me in righteousness and judgment and chesed, difficult word to translate, and in mercy. Ve'rastich li be'emunah, and I will betroth you to me in faith. Ve'yadat et Yehovah, and you will know Yehovah. And this is an interesting statement. All this betrothal 3 times. Why doesn't he say, I will marry you?
Wow.
Why does he say, I will betroth you?
Wow.
Now, if we have anybody listening in China, one of the things I learned when I was in China is they don't have the concept of betrothal. In modern English, we call betrothal to get engaged. You give the woman the ring, etc. And so they actually don't have that in China. I would meet these people, and they would be talking like I actually knew this guy in China. He was an American. He was about to marry this Chinese woman, and they got wedding photos, which in China they do before the wedding. They dress up in their wedding outfit, and she's in the white dress, and he's in the tuxedo, and they go to some park somewhere, and they take. Do they do that in America? Before the wedding?
Well, there's engagement. No. Before the actual wedding.
It's wedding photos.
Some people do wedding photos the day of the wedding.
Oh no, this is months before.
Oh, okay, no.
And I said, wow, these are such nice pictures with your fiance, or actually he said, let me show you the pictures with my girlfriend. And I look at these pictures and I'm like, what? Girlfriend? She's your fiance. And he explained in China they don't have that concept. There's your girlfriend and you marry your girlfriend. In America, you don't marry your girlfriend. There's an intermediary stage that we have in Western culture. In biblical culture, it's actually closer to China, perhaps, because there was a woman who had no status whatsoever, and then you would betroth her. You would become engaged to her, and that actually is a legal status in the Torah. Wow. In fact, if you have relations with a woman who's betrothed and she's not your fiance, then that is adultery. And according to the Torah, you're both worthy of death. So that's a very big deal, betrothal. It's the stage before marriage that has a legal status. And we have that in America. In Western countries, we've got engagement. So why does he say, let me translate this into modern English.
Yes.
I'm gonna be engaged to you forever. I'm going to be engaged to you in righteousness and in justice and in mercy and in righteousness, whatever, chesed, and in mercy. I'm going to be engaged to you in faith, and you will know Yehovah. And that last you will know, that's this intimacy, to know God.
To know God.
In an intimate sense. It's strange. Why is it betrothed and not marriage? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Wow, I really don't. I mean, it's funny because when you say, and I will betroth you, my thought was, see, I was thinking a little bit different. I was thinking betrothal means we're getting, I mean, there's the actual ceremony, but basically if I'm betrothed to you, that's it.
But that's not it.
No, I'm saying in my mind, I'm thinking that this means, okay, you're betrothed. That means as far as we're concerned, we're getting married.
Maybe this is too personal for me because I've been engaged and not married. Engagement doesn't mean necessarily you'll be married. Married, that is this covenant before God. Engagement is a step before that. I don't know.
But in ancient times, so if someone was betrothed to them, that was pretty serious, right?
It's serious today.
Yeah,
no question about it. And I'm saying biblically, you are bound to that person, and if they cheat on you, that's adultery.
Yeah.
And my point, the difference is though in marriage. In Deuteronomy 24, we've got the whole thing about divorce, and there's a whole thing with a certificate of divorce. With betrothal, you don't have that. Meaning betrothal, you can break off the betrothal. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not a nice thing. It's not a good thing. It's a painful thing, believe me. But you don't need that whole divorce process, which is a much bigger deal in Deuteronomy 24. And the point is, and I don't have the answer.
The actual section ended on 22 in 22, correct?
In the Hebrew, which is 20 in the English, right?
And again, we're talking about the issue of betrothal. Right. But does the end help the matter, or not really? In other words,
meaning here's one way of reading it.
Right.
I'm going to betroth you to me 3 times. Then it says, and then you will know Yehovah. In other words, that knowing Yehovah, that is the consummation of the betrothal,
right,
ending in marriage. And so, arguably, the verse does have marriage in it. But where I'm vexed about it and struggling with it is the statement, "I will betroth you to me forever." I don't have an answer. I think it's very interesting though.
Okay.
And this is definitely understood in later Jewish tradition as what we've done today in Jewish tradition. By the way, is there's a formal betrothal process, which is actually the day of the wedding. I don't know if you know that. In other words, when a Jewish man gives the woman the ring, according to the rabbis, they're not actually technically betrothed. That betrothal, it's almost like there's a 4th stage. You've got the girlfriend, you've got the engagement, the betrothal, and the wedding in rabbinical tradition, at least.
Well, if this is
I don't know.
So
I don't have an answer.
I think you should give this as the word. What this word to?
Okay, let's do it. So the word is aras, aleph resh sin, and he says ve'erastich. Ve is and, e is I will, ve'e rastich, and I will. Rast, sorry. Scratch that. I'm tired. This is the 3rd episode we're doing today. Ve'erastich. It's the inverted future. So
say the whole word because I think it's really interesting.
Ve'erastich.
Yes.
Okay. Ve'erastich. So the ich part at the end, the ch part is you.
Yes.
To a woman.
Yep.
The t part at the end is I will.
Yes.
Actually, it's I did. Yep. But the vav at the beginning, the ve, means both and it changes the I did to I will.
Yes, sir.
And then the root is eras, aleph, resh, sin, and a place and that actually appears twice. Ve'erastich, ve'erastich, ve'erastich. Aleph, resh, sin is the root. And just a couple places where you have that root, this betrothal. Exodus 22:15, verse 16 in the English talks about a man who seduces a virgin who is not lo orasa. She is not engaged. She is not betrothed.
Yes.
Deuteronomy 20 verse 7. Deuteronomy 22 23 and on has a whole series of commandments related to betrothal. And then Deuteronomy 28:30 has actually a curse. For those who violate the Torah. It says you will engage a woman and another man will lie with her. So we've got this word betrothal, and here it has this obviously symbolic spiritual meaning where God is going to betroth Israel. One last verse is 2 Samuel chapter 3 verse 14. Look that up. There's it's actually, today we give a ring. Even in ancient times when you betrothed a woman, you gave something, and 2 Samuel 3:14 has a very interesting replacement for a ring, a very interesting betrothal gift. You could look it up for yourself.
Okay. So which verse are we officially going to end on?
22.
Okay. 22.
Verse 20 in the English is the official ending. We skipped ahead, but yeah.
Okay. So okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to say?
That's it. I'm done.
Nothing else?
That's what I got.
Wow. Well, and you're sticking to it. That's it.
I'm sticking to it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we are in a great place right now. This is really a great passage for people to look at. Go to those sections again, and hopefully over the next few weeks you're going to be able to learn a little bit more of the biblical Hebrew that we're talking about. And I have to just say, Nehemia, I don't know, we haven't talked about this, but this has really been a gift. One of the things that you provide each week is actually the actual passage in Hebrew where people can actually listen to the actual passage in Hebrew. So in other words, when they go to Prophet Pearls on bfainternational.com, nehemiaswall.com, they listen to the Prophet Pearls, but then the actual section itself has been recorded by ours truly, Nehemia Gordon. And what I want to challenge people to do is that, they might think, I'll never be able to do that. But what is it? I like to say one letter, one vowel at a time, and pretty soon people can learn to at least be able to proclaim these words. It's not something that's an impossible language. It's not an easy language, but I have to say it's powerful.
It's a very easy language.
It's a beautiful language,
Go try to learn Chinese.
Oh my God. 你会说一点普通话吗？我说的不好。
我说一点点普通话。一点点普通话。We're talking Chinese.
We're talking Chinese. Woo! Hey, well, listen, this is it for right now. I'm really motivated and excited. Yeah. We've got a couple more today, and then we're going to be going out and being with the community here for Purim. I'd like to say a prayer, if I can, and then we'll move on. Father, thank you for the gift of this language that you selected. You selected the Hebrew language, and we certainly have the ability because of it. You'll give us the ability to understand it. Give us the focus and the excitement and the joy to be able to speak your language, not to stick our chest out, but rather in humility to realize that you've given us revelation in this language and that we actually can learn it. Now I ask that you would continue to give us motivation and revelation and inspiration, and continue to give us the desire to want to know the information so that we can find out what it means for your word yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and how we can live it in our lives. In your holy name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson. For more information, please visit nehemiaswall.com and bfainternational.com.